Before you watch this episode of our City Current radio show, I want to invite you to join City Current's e-learning and online personal development platform called Growth Current. I'm Jeremy Park, host of the City Current radio show and CEO of City Current. Growth Current is your exclusive ticket to attend virtual events with global thought leaders, national guest speakers, and experts who can help you grow personally and professionally. It gives you access to success secrets, lessons learned, learning modules, and so much more. Being online, you can join us from anywhere in the world. Subscriptions are only $8 a month, or you can do bulk subscriptions for your team. Check out growthcurrent.com to learn more and to join us in our efforts to power the good. And now, on to the show. Welcome back to the City Current Radio Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. On this segment, we get to dive into some music history, the famous world of the Rat Pack. Here with us, we have Richard Lertzman, known as Rick. So Rick is talking about his new book, Deconstructing the Rat Pack, Joey, the Mob, and the Summit. So Rick, how are you doing, sir?
Great, Jeremy. How are you?
Doing well. So first, let's talk about what led you to write this book. So let's start there.
You know, a couple things. I got to know Joey Bishop, who was one of the five in the Rat Pack, and I got to know him over about a 20-year period toward the end of his life. And he told me some inside stories of the Rat Pack. On another area, I had grown up in a family business, and I got to know from Cleveland, Ohio, where I grew up, a lot of the people who were the mobsters who went into business in Las Vegas, like Mo Dalitz and Carl Cohn and Mickey Cohn and Max Diamond, and I got to know the inside of how it was put together. So I heard from Joey and from them, and I really was interested that the Rat Pack was more of a myth of what we believe to be the Rat Pack, and how it really was completely different. So sort of like Liberty Valance, they printed the legend, and we believe that legend, but the legend that was far deeper and kind of more interesting than what people believe of this freewheeling five guys who are out drinking and carousing all night.
Yeah, because you point out in the book that in many cases they're in their 40s, they have kids. Like it was not the glitz and glamour and womanizing necessarily that was portrayed. And to your point, let's just go ahead and dive in. So when you talk about the Rat Pack, you kind of liken it to a boy band that was put together in very much a business reason in terms of promoting Las Vegas, the casinos, which Sinatra had a stake in. So talk about some of the pieces that are these myths, if you will. Let's do some myth busting.
And it's true, Jeremy, because if we look at today's, we see the boy bands that are created. This is a boy band of 1960. They weren't boys; they were older guys. But in that generation, these were the stars. They're in 1960. Elvis is breathing down their neck. The Beatles are right around the corner, and the Rolling Stones, and all the groups. Pop music's changing. Frank Sinatra knows it. So by the late 1950s, there's a lot of money pouring into Vegas, but most of the people are coming from Los Angeles. And the guys in the mob who are investing millions and millions in brick and mortar buildings, they want to make it a destination site for the rest of the country. So they saw that the impact of a Danny Thomas TV show did in reservations in Las Vegas. And Frank Sinatra was given by the mob guys 9% stake in the ownership of the Sands Hotel. So he had an interest. And Frank, which people don't know, was really a brilliant business person. He knew, he had an awareness that his window was shutting. He'd still be famous, but this was his peak, and he wanted to cash in. He had crashed in the early 50s, lost all his money, and he wanted to really now make hay. So when they came to him, a guy named Al Freeman, who was the publicist for the Sands Hotel, who had worked for George Evans before with Frank Sinatra, he saw the power of Frank Sinatra. Frank had watched this group in the Sahara Lounge, Louis Prima and Keely Smith and Sam Butera, how loose and fun, and they had this act. So Frank and Al Freeman said, Frank said, I want to do what Freeman did on stage. So this is in 59. So what they did was they scripted it. They got a guy named Don Sherman, who wrote for Joey Bishop. Don Sherman's daughter is Amy Sherman Palladino, who writes and does Mrs. Maisel, among other things. And so Don Sherman, they crafted this act, and Frank was working with Dean Martin in Some Come Running. He had just nursed Sammy back to health. Sammy had lost his eye in a car accident and was learning how to read dance and do everything. So he figured, let me put this great talent together. Joey fell into it because Joey was the opening act for Frank Sinatra. And what Frank liked about Joey was he didn't challenge him. He was an okay journeyman comic who was there, didn't suck the air out like Buddy Hackett or Don Rickles. He just got the audience warmed up. And Peter Lawford was an interesting one. Peter Lawford had met a guy named George Clayton Thomas, who was a gas station attendant, but he was writing all these stories. Clayton Thomas later wrote Kick the Can for the Twilight Zone and the Logan's Run and all this great science fiction stuff. But at that point, he had done the black market in World War II. So he brought to this heist tale of his guys getting back together and doing a heist in Las Vegas. Peter tried to sell it by himself, couldn't sell it, showed it to Frank Sinatra, who loved it, took it to Jack Warner, who said, well, he liked this, he'll do it. And they got Louis Milestone. So Frank put the idea, well, why don't we shoot it in Las Vegas while we're doing this summit? So everything, all the,
I'll say, therein goes your brilliant businessman of, hey, we can shoot the movie during the day, put on the show at night. I get my 9% cut of this as a business, put together the boy band, and we've got a great business.
And all the elements played together.
Yeah.
And Jack Warner loved the idea because he didn't have to pay for location shoots.
Right.
It was all paid for by the Sands. What they were careful was that it wasn't just shot at the Sands, because you've got 7 other mob influences and you don't step on their toes. So everybody was included. It was kumbaya for the whole mob.
Yeah.
We had a moment where everybody got shown, everybody would be included. So for 28 days in February of 1960, they did 2 shows a night, 8 o'clock and 12 o'clock. Then they woke up the next day at 6 o'clock, had a makeup call, and shot during the day Ocean's 11. So I don't think these 40-year-old something guys are with their wives are out partying and having a carousing and girls. And I don't think they had logistically they could. And I don't think they could anyways, because, who has the time?
Well,
so
to your point too, though, they all understand the business side, but they also understand the PR and the angle of publicity and putting out necessarily the showmanship side of this. And so there's a reality of the business versus the showmanship, and you get to create your own imaging, if you will, that becomes a big part of the Rat Pack.
Right, and which is today's boys band. They create the image. Right. So I had friends who had went to see the show, and they said if you go to the 8 o'clock show or the midnight show, it was the same show. Every little joke, every little thing that looked like an ad lib, rolling out the bar, or Sammy picking him up and saying, here's my trophy, and all these little ad libs, they were there every show. This wasn't something that all of a sudden Frank came up with and they were that quick at ad libs. It was a well worked out, well rehearsed show.
Which shows you the level of professionalism, to your point. Like these are professionals. They're going to put on a show, they're going to do their movie, but at the same time, they know how to make money.
They know how to make money. And, where they said Dean's drunk on the stage. Well, Dina Martin, who I know, Dina told me, Dean may have drank in real life, but when he was on stage, he was drinking apple juice. You can't lose your timing. So it's great. Dean's the happy drunk on stage. He's drinking apple juice. And they roll a bar out on stage and the whole show and people bought it. And that's been the legend. And for 60 years, that legend's resonated to this day that, and it's the last stand of misogyny. This is the last stand where there's chicky poos and ring-a-ding-ding times. And if you did that today, when you watch Ocean's 11 today, my skin crawls a little bit because it's so out of touch with our reality from today. So, but it still resonates today because this was that last era of Frank and all of them, and this is their last breath. This year was right before the onslaught of the British bands and rock and roll and everything else from the 60s era. So
even to the point in the beginning, it was a very short-lived time period because after this, everything kind of falls apart. Now, they weren't really best friends coming in. In many cases, they were close acquaintances, especially on the business side, but they weren't really close friends. And so after this, some of those relationships start to unravel, and that becomes kind of the beginning of the end in a way.
Well, right after 1960, right after the shoot Ocean's 11, they go to the Fontainebleau and they do a show with Elvis, and Frank kind of buries the hatchet with Elvis, and they're all on stage. And this is the last step. In August, they have a premiere, and they do another movie, Sergeants 3, with all of them. But then Peter Lawford has the bad news to carry to Frank Sinatra that his brother-in-law won't be coming to his Palm Springs house. And Peter delivers that bad news. And by delivering it, that's the end of Peter. And Frank made sure Peter was blackballed in Las Vegas. Joey Bishop, for some reason, for 25 years, he works hard to get to his high point, and then he bites the hand that fed him, which is Frank Sinatra. And Frank asked him to go to the Cal Neva Lodge and do him a favor. And Joey was in no mood. Joey said, I want 50,000, I want this. And Frank, in essence, said, good luck. And that was the end of Joey. So Joey, in the next film, which was Robin and the Seven Hoods, there's no Joey. There's Guy Gisborne is Peter Falk. So Joey disappears. And then along the way, Sammy has problems with drugs and other things. Frank kind of separates from Sammy. Frank and Dean always went his own way. Dean never followed Frank. He had a team member that he was already acquainted with named Jerry Lewis. So he didn't really want to be part of a team or anything else. He did it because he wanted to make as much money, and he continued to, because Dean was another one who was a business person.
Yeah. What was your favorite part of writing this book? Either a storyline that was uncovered, kind of like everything we're talking about, but what either is a different story, or what was maybe your favorite part of writing this book?
It's discovering that it's a business. It was a blueprint, and going into the UNLV archives and discovering that it's a blueprint, that it's a plan, that it's put together, and doing the research on that. It's fascinating, kind of uncovering this myth that was created that everybody bought, and pushing it and really convincing everybody of the truths of that. And then knowing Joey Bishop and seeing how he burned bridges and didn't work the last 40 years of his life, and doing the research, interviewing Gary Marshall, who was a writer for Joey Bishop, and interviewing Sheldon Leonard and a lot of people who were in that business at the time. So interviews are so interesting because they really tell you the backgrounds and the truths of that era. And I love doing that. I love delving into that as a journalist.
Yeah, I think, what you're talking about is just, to your point, it's the power of marketing, obviously, the blueprint. And really that's kind of the genesis of, then when you look at the music industry, the boy bands and everything, kind of the formula of bringing different pieces together to create these business opportunities that yet yield huge success. Looking back and saying, man, that right there was kind of the starting point of this. And looking at, to your point, just the relationships and how, in many cases, taking care of those relationships can either lead to long-lasting success or burning bridges and jeopardizing your future. And so many different lessons that you can pull in and out from this book. What's maybe one other thing that you want people to take away in terms of a lesson from the book?
Well, the one thing is that one thing that resonates 60 years later is that the talent of Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, and Sammy Davis Jr. They had such great presence on stage. And to this day, you don't hear much about Bob Hope or Bing Crosby, but Frank Sinatra is still out there, and he still resonates his music, and so does Dean Martin. Sammy didn't have a body of work as deep as they did, but I've seen Sammy on stage, and he was astounding. He could sing, he could dance. On stage, he had such magnetic presence, and it really still resonates to this day when you see even clips of them. It's just magical to watch. Even though I have the knowledge that I know it's not ad lib and it's not as freewheeling, it's fun to watch. And there's still acts that go around the country that play the Rat Pack. In cities from Las Vegas on, there are always these Rat Pack groups. And when you think that it only lasted for 28 days, basically, and it's 60 years later, it's still resonating, that one 28-day act, it's amazing.
Even knowing the the movie magic, if you will, the Hollywood magic side of this, like the apple juice, it still does. I think it still impresses you because, to your point, the level of professionalism and pulling all the pieces together and still shooting a movie during the day and then putting on 2 shows every single night and doing the marketing and PR and creating the myth, if you will, that's a lot of work. And to your point, to take 28 days and then to stand 60 years later, to still stand the test of time and to still be, famously known as the Rat Pack, it just goes to show you how much of a legacy they created, obviously, in such a short amount of time. So wrap up with just where we can get the book. Once again, the book is Deconstructing the Rat Pack, Joey the Mob, and the Summit, and it's out right now. So talk about where we can get the book.
The book is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, Books A Million, Kobo, so you can get it in ebook or you can get it in book form. It's a fun read. It's kind of a talky, gossipy read. And I think it really tells a fun tale, kind of the backstory of really what happened. And we did it with a lot of research and interviews. And I was lucky enough to have talked to a lot of people who don't live, and to hear this story. So it's a fascinating backstory.
Wrap up, Rick, on where we can just find more about you, social media, website. Where do we go to follow you personally?
I have a blog. It's called thelifeandtimesofhollywood.com. And every day I have stories or blogs. I'm a film historian, journalist at heart. So I love the story of film. And I've done books like The Life and Times of Mickey Rooney from Simon & Schuster, and Beyond Columbo, The Life and Times of Peter Falk, Dr. Feelgood, which is being made into a film by Warner Brothers. So, I'm always, and if you ever want to write me or talk, we're there at the blogs. You could talk to us.
Well, Rick Lertzman, once again, the book, Deconstructing the Rat Pack, Joey the Mob, and the Summit. Greatly appreciate you coming on the show and sharing. Thank you.
Jeremy, I really appreciate the time. Thank you.